Ever find yourself making a snap decision, like super certain about it, and then later you're like, wait, did I even think about other options? Or maybe you've gone into something totally confident just to realize, oh, maybe I jumped the gun there.
Yeah, I think we've all had those moments, right? Where we think we're being totally rational, but then...
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today, how our minds really work, especially when we make choices. And we're taking inspiration from a summary of Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow to guide us.
It's a classic for a reason. Kahneman really breaks down how we actually think, not just how we think we think.
Totally. And for everyone listening, this isn't just some abstract psych theory. This is about giving you a better understanding of your own mind so you can make smarter choices, whether it's in your personal life or at work.
It's like getting a behind-the-scenes look at your own brain, and who doesn't want that?
Okay, so to kick things out, we're talking about two main ways our brains process information: fast and intuitive versus slow and analytical, and how those can lead to predictable mental hiccups, those cognitive biases, and the shortcuts we rely on called heuristics.
And we'll get into how just changing the way a choice is presented, the framing, can have a crazy big impact on what we decide.
Right. And then there's that feeling of I'm 100% right, even when maybe, just maybe, we're not overconfident.
We'll also tackle the role of intuition, both the good and the not so good, and why it always seems like projects take way longer than we think they will.
Oh, and that thing where losing, say, $10 hurts way more than gaining $10 feels good. Loss aversion, we'll cover that too. All of this comes from the key ideas in the summary of Kahneman's work, by the way.
And as we go through this, it's important to remember Kahneman isn't saying one way of thinking is better. It's about knowing how both systems work, their strengths, their weaknesses, and how they shape our decisions.
So, ready to get into the nitty-gritty of our minds? Let's start with those two thinking systems. The summary calls the fast, intuitive, automatic one System 1. Like, what pops into your head right now if I say peanut butter?
Jelly. See, that was instant. No effort. That's System 1. It's happening below the radar most of the time, and it's where those gut feelings come from. It handles so much, from recognizing faces to understanding basic language.
Exactly. Now, think about something that takes your full attention, like trying to solve a tricky math problem or parallel parking in a tiny space.
That mental strain, that focus, that's System 2. It kicks in for complex stuff, logic, weighing your options. The summary points out something interesting. Even though System 2 feels like it's in charge, System 1 often throws out the first ideas. System 2 is more like the editor, right?
So System 1 is like, here's an idea. And System 2 is like, let's tweak this, or nope, not going to happen. The summary even talks about how System 2 can like keep System 1 in check. Like if you're trying to stay calm when you're angry, that's System 2 stepping in.
Right. And this brings us to cognitive ease. System 1 loves things that are easy to process, familiar stuff, clear information, maybe even a rhyme. When things are smooth, System 1 is happy. But System 2, that needs effort. It's triggered when things are new, surprising, or just plain complicated.
So System 1 likes it easy. System 2 is for the heavy lifting. Now, how does this all lead to those mental traps we mentioned?
That's where cognitive biases and heuristics come in. Since System 1 is all about speed, it relies on mental shortcuts, or heuristics. Think of them like rules of thumb. They usually help us make sense of the world without overthinking everything, but they can also make us consistently mess up our thinking, those cognitive biases.
So it's not just random mistakes. It's our brains taking shortcuts that lead to predictable errors. The summary really emphasizes that we're not always as rational as we like to think we are. System 1 is pulling strings in the background all the time.
Yep. The summary has some great examples, like judging people based on first impressions or what our friends say. System 1 jumps to conclusions with limited info. It might miss important stuff, like chance or the situation.
The point about how we retell events was really eye-opening, how our viewpoint and what we did shapes our memory and how we tell the story to others.
It's like someone rewrites the story to fit our perspective, right? Makes us look a little better, maybe.
Now, the summary also talks about how the way information is presented can change our minds even if the facts are the same. Anchoring and framing effects, right?
Yeah, framing is all about how we react based on how something is phrased. Like, imagine a medical treatment. Saying it has a 90% survival rate sounds way better than saying there's a 10% mortality rate, right? Same info, different frame, totally different reaction.
It's like our brains get stuck on that first piece of info, the anchor. Even if it's random, that first number, the way the problem is worded, it can really skew things. Like if someone starts a negotiation with a ridiculously high price,
right. That number becomes the anchor, even if the final price is much lower.
Okay, let's talk about overconfidence, something I think we're all familiar with. The summary says System 1 isn't big on doubt. It believes its own hype, no proof needed. It ignores anything unclear unless something screams danger.
That I'm right feeling that System 1 gives, not always accurate. This is where overconfidence comes in. We can be dead certain about something based on a gut feeling, but as the summary warns, relying only on those feelings, especially for big decisions, is risky business.
The summary mentions how people in high-pressure jobs, like traders or ER doctors, might learn to tune out that doubt from System 2 and go more with System 1. It's like they have to adapt to make those split-second decisions.
It makes sense in a way. In those fields, being fast and decisive is key. Intuition, especially if it's backed by experience, can feel like the best way to go. But even pros can fall into the overconfidence trap if they don't use System 2 to analyze and check themselves.
The summary also brings up something called substitution. Can you explain that?
Substitution happens when there's a tough question that System 2 would have to really work on. Instead of doing that, System 1 swaps it out for a simpler related question. We answer the easy one and think we've answered the hard one.
Sneaky. We don't even realize the swap. How does this tie in with that feeling of cognitive ease we talked about?
That feeling is key to whether we question the substitution. If the swapped question feels easy, we're more likely to accept the answer. The ease tells System 1 everything is good, so System 2 doesn't get involved. But if it feels hard, that might trigger System 2 to step in and be like, hold up, is this right?
So feeling good can make us accept a quick, maybe wrong answer without the critical thinking of System 2. System 1 takes the easy route.
Right. And that ease can come from things like familiarity, how clear something is, if it rhymes, even our mood. Feeling good can make System 2 less watchful.
Now, while we've talked about the downsides of System 1, the summary does say intuition is important. Where does that fit in?
System 1 and intuition are super useful for quick, everyday choices where you don't have time to overthink. Reacting to avoid an accident, making a play in sports, that's all intuition honed by experience. But it's risky to rely only on intuition for big, complex decisions with real consequences. That's when System 2 needs to analyze things.
So knowing when to trust your gut and when to think it through is key.
It's about finding that balance, recognizing when System 1 might be messing with you and when to call in System 2 for a reality check.
The summary gets into prospect theory and how we deal with risk, especially loss aversion. That idea that losses hurt more than gains feel good, that seems like a big part of how we make choices.
Huge. Prospect theory basically says the emotional punch of a loss is way stronger than the joy of an equal gain. The summary even calls losing money derogatory, which shows how negative it feels.
And they give a great example. Losing $10 hurts way more if you only have 20 to start with. It's not just the amount, it's how much it impacts what you have.
Exactly. And prospect theory says how good or bad a gain or loss feels depends on what you already have. A small win might not matter to a rich person, but it could be huge for someone who's struggling.
This loss aversion explains why we'd rather not lose something we have than gain something of the same value. Fear of missing out, or FOMO, plays into this too. The potential loss feels worse than the potential gain.
Totally. Loss aversion is everywhere. It affects how we negotiate, why people hang on to bad investments, all sorts of things.
Now, the summary doesn't explicitly say planning fallacy, but all this talk about overconfidence and System 1 not doubting itself, that explains why we underestimate how long stuff will take, right?
Absolutely. System 1 is an optimist. It focuses on the best case scenario and ignores the messy stuff. That leads to unrealistic plans and underestimating time and effort. It's that it'll be fine feeling, but System 2 might see the problems if we actually engaged it.
The summary also mentions how advertising works. They say it targets System 1, using flashy visuals, rhymes, things that are easy to process. It wants to get to us before System 2 can step in and be like, wait a minute.
Right. Advertising tries to bypass critical thinking and make us want something based on a feeling or a quick judgment, not logic.
And that example about how our values, like not liking gambling, can affect System 1's reactions was really interesting. Shows how those deep beliefs shape our good responses. But the summary says we can use System 2 to think things through even when it goes against those gut feelings.
That's the power of conscious effort. We can actually choose to use System 2 to override System 1 when we need to, even if it's hard. It lets us make smarter choices.
So after all this, what's the big lesson for decision-making? The summary says to be deliberate, but not to get stuck in overthinking.
Yeah, we need to use System 2 for important choices, but not get paralyzed by endless analysis.
So it's about knowing when to put in the mental effort and when to resist going with your gut, especially if it's a big deal.
Exactly. The summary also says making choices in a bubble without other viewpoints is a bad idea. It's like not using System 2 to see the bigger picture.
And I loved how the summary pointed out that we remember how we felt way more than what actually happened. The picnic example with the flat tire was perfect. A bad ending can totally taint the whole memory.
And that bad feeling makes System 1 wary of picnics in the future, so System 2 will probably be more involved next time, maybe with backup plans or a different spot. It shows how our past feelings shape our future choices.
Finally, the summary talks about how these ideas apply to so many things: business, finance, even investing. The example about resisting impulsive investments and using a system like SIBS that's like a System 2 approach, right?
It is. It shows how understanding our minds can actually improve things like our financial systems. It encourages us to be less emotional and more rational, which is really important in those areas.
Okay, so to wrap this up for everyone listening, we all have these two systems that are constantly influencing us, often without us even realizing it. Knowing how they work, spotting those biases and shortcuts, and using System 2 when it matters, that's how you make better decisions in every part of your life.
Think about a recent decision you made, big or small. Which system was running the show? Did any of the biases we talked about sneak in?
Just paying attention to your own thinking can be really revealing. It can help you make better choices in the future.
And if you're intrigued by this peek into thinking fast and slow, dive into the full book or explore more about cognitive psychology and behavioral economics. There's a whole world of fascinating knowledge out there about how your mind works.